Thank you very much, Mel. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed ministers and guests, thank you very much for taking the time to join us for today's launch of the Energy Efficiency Policy Training Week for Latin America 2022. And a very warm welcome to all of those around the world, and particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, who are viewing this live stream. Let me start by thanking our co-organizers for this event, the Secretary of Energy of Panama, CAF, the World Bank, and the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program. We are very grateful for your cooperation and support. Secretary Rivera, a special thanks to you for your support in the planning of this training week over the past 2 years. We had hoped to be meeting you in person in Panama. However, we're very happy to be joining you here today in this virtual format. This training week is really a pillar of the IEA's cooperation with emerging economies in advancing clean energy transitions. Over the past 6 years, our energy efficiency training weeks have brought together more than 1,800 policymakers and experts from 120 countries. We have many young professionals among our participants, and I'm very happy to see that we have prominent youth leaders among our panelists today. We cannot achieve just energy transitions without listening to and working with you. So thank you very much for being a part of our training week. This discussion is clearly taking place during difficult times for the world. Many countries are facing immediate and hard-hitting challenges related to energy prices and resilience, which risk eroding progress in ensuring clean, affordable, modern, and sustainable energy for all. And in this context, energy efficiency really is essential. It is, as we at the IEA always say, the very first fuel. In our IEA roadmap for net zero by 2050, energy efficiency and renewable energy partner to provide universal access to electricity and to clean cooking, at the same time as driving emissions down to net zero. And we can't do it without energy efficiency. Clean energy, as our analysis shows, will create millions of jobs, and many millions of lives will be improved thanks to reduced pollution, greater access and affordability, and improved quality of life. Realizing these benefits requires stronger and faster action on energy efficiency. And this is why I'm so pleased to be here with you today at the launch of this very important training week. I'd like to especially thank all of the speakers, the experts and trainers from all around the region who will be joining us in leading and enriching the sessions. And we're also very pleased to see prominent regional organizations, OLADE, UNECLAC, the Brazilian Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank on the agenda today. Thank you very much to all of you. I'd also like to remind you all that from June 7 to 9, the IEA will be holding our 7th annual Global Conference on Energy Efficiency in Sonderborg, Denmark, and we very warmly invite you to join us there. Dear colleagues, Secretary Rivera, thank you very much. I look forward to today's discussion and wish you a very successful training week ahead. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mary. And now we're delighted to be able to turn to Secretary Rivera to make his opening remarks. And thanks once again, Secretary Rivera, for all the help that you and your team have given us in bringing this event to life. Over to you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for this opportunity. For us, it's a pleasure to finally have this event, this important event. Our greetings and salutes to Mario Warlick, Deputy Director of the International Energy Agency. Our warm regards also to Dr. Fatih Birol. We have an ongoing relation and work in recent years, and we are very happy of the leadership of the agency in the most relevant issues related to energy in the world and the fight climate change, and also in the recent times on the geopolitical impact of the war, right? It's happening right now in Europe, and the leadership also of the agency in giving alternatives and options and measures to have on a global scale, and looking for peace also, and that energy is part of that. For us, is great, and as mentioned, also I want to thank and greet also the World Bank, the CAF, the Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, the ISMAP, that is part of the organizations that have taken part in this week of energy efficiency training for the Latin American region. I recall maybe mid 2019 that we were starting to plan and to have this meeting in person, but then in March 2020, the pandemic hit everyone in the world, so we have to adapt, as all we have been doing in the recent years, to the new circumstances. So here we are. We are happy that we have this tools of a virtual meeting to go ahead and have this week of training for Latin America. For the Secretary of Energy, it's a great opportunity to share the things that we're developing right now on the policy program project levels, but also to learn from the peers, to learn from what are we doing as a region and in the world about energy efficiency. As Ms. Worley was saying, the opportunities that the energy efficiency and the impulse and the strength of the renewables around the world are giving us all the opportunity to fight climate change, but also to give a fair and equitable energy transition. That is really important for us, not only about technology. We are very incisive in that energy transition is not only about technology, it's about people. And we have been also working with the International Energy Agency on this concept. How do we focus these results on the people, and the commission specifically formed for that? So we're happy to be working together to have that. According to several studies and projections, energy efficiency could give us around 25% of the elements to fight and to fulfill our net zero goals from now to 2050. So it's really important, almost as important as the impulse of renewables. So we have to see as we have to have a holistic approach on this, and we're happy to be part of that. For us, we have an energy transition agenda in Panama. It comprehends 5 national strategies, and one of them is energy efficiency strategy. And we're working hard. Actually, we're right now on the process of publishing and approving by the government this national strategy for the next 8 years. It's aligned with the SDGs of the United Nations with a time frame of 2030. So we expect to fulfill that, to fulfill the energy efficiency goals that we have on the SDG 7, and also to be part of the countries that can lead ahead the process of energy efficiency. We have a lot of experiences to share with kind of countries like us, developing countries, and also have the lessons learned from the developed countries. This week of training is part of that feedback and in exchange of lessons learned, and of course the best practices that we have right now available. And of course to innovate, the opportunities to innovate, that the things that we're doing in our countries. And we are more than sure that this week will give us the instruments, the tools, the information, the knowledge to take action, to put that into action and to give these opportunities to our citizens in the region and in the world. So we hope the best for these sessions, and thank you very much. Have a great week of capacity.
Thank you very much, Secretary Rivera, and thanks very much for your warm welcoming remarks as well. We're going to move now into a series of panels where we're going to hear from a wide range of people with experience in the region about aspects of energy efficiency and clean energy transitions that hopefully will help frame our conversations for this week. And I'd like to first hand to Dr. Brian Motherway, who's Head of Energy Efficiency here at the IEA, to chair the first panel, which is on advancing towards affordable and sustainable energy for all in Latin America. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mel. And let me add my warm welcome on behalf of all of us here at the IEA to this training week. We're very excited to be back with a large group of people from the Latin American region doing this training week this week. You're all very welcome. And all of you joining us for today's high-level live stream, you're very welcome as well. And Secretary Rivera, let me do two things. First of all, commend you and Panama's leadership in clean energy, energy efficiency, and of course, SDG 7. And let me also thank you for your kind hosting of this week's training. And it's a pleasure to work with you, Secretary, as well as your team, Rosalena and Guadalupe, and all of our friends in Panama. We're delighted to be working with you, and we're looking forward to this week of discussions with all of our friends. So we're going to hear from some really interesting people now over the next 45 minutes to give some high-level comments and to help us frame some of the discussion that's going to take place over the coming days. And I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us, and I'll turn and introduce each one in turn. And first of all, I'm going to go to Sustainable Energy for All, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by Glenn Pierce-Oroz, who's the Senior Director in SE for All. And of course, SE for All has a lead role in many aspects of sustainable energy, but particularly the context we're in around Sustainable Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goal 7 on clean, affordable access to energy for all. So starting there, Glenn, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to ask you how you see progress on Sustainable Development Goal 7, and particularly looking at the short term, looking at the next few years, what do you think are the key needs for Latin America in this regard?
So thank you very much, Brian. And it's a pleasure to join you and to join this training session. Sustainable Energy for All is certainly very proud to be associated with these efforts and the partnership with Latin America. In terms of SDG 7, I would like to point out perhaps a few challenges that we see, in particular for LAC. When we think about, and I'll talk just briefly about access. When we think about access to electrification, very good. 98% of the population has access to electrification. Less good in terms of clean cooking, 88% of the population with access to clean cooking. And clearly, clean cooking has an element of energy efficiency, which is extremely important to recognize. I would like to just highlight that Latin America and the Caribbean has the opportunity of really taking leadership in terms of last mile progress. And what I mean by that is we know that many countries which are struggling with universal access to energy still have quite some way to go. Other countries who have reached significant coverage have also bumped up to the 95, 97% access, and then taken another 15 years or so to finalize those last 3%. So do not underestimate the challenges of the last mile. And this is where Latin America can be most helpful in being able to demonstrate what are some opportunities for addressing that last mile. I would like to also point out that in terms of energy efficiency, LAC currently has outperformed the global average in terms of energy efficiency, which is very good. However, less good are the trends that we have seen between 2010 and 2017, where LAC has a lower rate of improvement, of annual improvement of 0.9%, when compared to other regions such as East Asia, Southeast Asia, that have been improving their energy efficiency at annual rates of 3.3%. So here is one of those challenges for LAC to take leadership. I'd like to perhaps make one suggestion, and this is to build on the type of leadership that LAC is taking, Latin American and the Caribbean is taking on renewable energy. The UN Energy Compact process, which was launched last year, did receive a very forward-looking energy compact from 12 Latin American countries, including Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, República Dominicana, Ecuador, Guatemala, Haití, Honduras, Paraguay, Peru, y Uruguay. So good set of countries which came together for a renewable energy in Latin America and the Caribbean Energy Compact, targeting 70% of installed capacity of electricity generation by 2030. The challenge then is if these 12 LAC countries can come together and set those ambitious targets for themselves in 2030 for renewable energy, let us try to do the same for energy efficiency. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Glenn. That's very clear, and it's great to have that call to action. And let me just ask you as a follow-up then, if countries want to raise their ambition for energy efficiency and set those targets, what kind of actions do you think they should be considering for energy efficiency?
So it's what I would say is I would start looking and paying very close attention to the inequalities that we know exist and are perennial in Latin America. We have some of the country societies that are perhaps the most unequal in the world. And so pay close attention to the rural-urban inequalities, the rural-urban divide. Energy efficiency can certainly boost local economies by improving productivity, creating jobs, and keeping investments in the region. Through development of different products, through better construction regulations, by retrofitting of existing buildings. There are a number of steps that can be taken. But again, if we talk about sustainable energy for all, let's make sure that we are providing these opportunities for all and addressing those inequalities that continue to exist.
Thank you very much, Glenn, and I'm sure that's a theme we'll return to, and thanks again for joining us. Let me turn now to Mexico, where I'm delighted to say we're joined by Deputy Secretary Miguel Ángel Maciel Torres, who is the Deputy Secretary of Hydrocarbons in the Secretary of Energy for Mexico. So, Deputy Secretary, thank you very much for joining us. And let me turn to you and ask you how you see the role of energy efficiency in Mexico, particularly in the context of current concerns around energy security, about the price of energy. How do you see the role of energy efficiency?
Gracias, buenos días.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm here with Engineer Walter Jimenez, specialist on the subject, and we will be answering your questions. Walter? Good morning. First of all, greetings from our Minister of Energy, Rocío Nale, who is present in this conference through us. During the last decades in Latin America, we have developed many markets by developing the energy such to make a sustainable energy for all the region. But that is fake, actually. We need to be seeing energy as a whole to understand that as a process is not only about generating energy, but also considering energy efficiency, the use of energy, and all associated technologies. And In that way, we can really plan which are the better ways to change our energy systems. In Mexico, that was put in our previous law that was approved in Peña Nieto's mandate. And it was very bad because actually at that point, energy efficiency was taken as the point to take energy to create all the sustainability that Mexico needed to benefit the population. And it was just to be taken as a mandatory point. But the process was a process in the progressive point of view. So the legislation in Latin America and Mexico is full of all these processes focused on investment from foreign people that are not going to benefit our populations, thinking of planning in the long term, and are not going to change our internal systems. So one of the challenges that we have nowadays is putting energy efficiency processes in the right terms to change our process, to change the transition, and to make benefits to our people from sustainable energy and cleaner energies through secure energy as well, and to guarantee that energy is cheap and secure for everyone. This forum also allows us to share what our government has developed for everyone, which is a sustainable program for everyone to use energy, and that we are going to share in this forum so that everyone can hear what are Mexico's programs nowadays. Again, we thank the opportunity to be here with you, and this is our first answer for you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary and colleague. It's great to hear of the very strong work that is being undertaken. And maybe I could just ask you a brief second question, which you have emphasized how energy efficiency can bring benefits to all the people of Mexico. And maybe you could say a little more about how you use energy efficiency to bring benefits to all citizens.
Nosotros estamos enfocando.
We are focusing our final user technologies to have cheaper technologies with a higher energy efficiency, so that more people can get it and have cheaper energy with a higher energy efficiency, and also integrating it so that energy efficiency is mandatory in our law. Nowadays, it doesn't exist because the law that was now launched by the president was not approved by the opposition. And now what we are trying is to get the energy efficiency as a mandatory part of our legislation in the end users through technology. And with the current legislation, that's not possible now. in this country. And now we are trying to work towards it, towards trying to get these planning variants and to get a mandatory energy efficiency and to get a most comprehensive framework, legal framework, so that everyone understands that we need to get energy efficiency in the whole country. Because in this perspective, it also impacts our economy. It has a high impact on our economy, and it gets a huge impact on the price economy that we are now having, and it will help all our populations with a sustainable energy for our population as well.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear the great work that is going on in Mexico, and congratulations on the strong leadership you're showing. And thank you again for joining us today as part of this event. It's been a pleasure to have you. Let me turn next now to the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, and we're joined by Antonio Piñera Silveira, who's the Vice President of Infrastructure and Digital Transformation. And Antonio, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And let me start by thanking you for the great collaboration we have in many spheres on an ongoing basis, but particularly in the context of this training week. We're delighted to be working with you, and we very much appreciate your support, Antonio. And let me bring you in by asking you a question in terms of, we see the importance of energy efficiency in the context of energy transition. So how do you see that Latin American countries can work to bring more energy efficiency to their economies?
Thank you very much, Brian. Pleasure for me to participate on this very important event. I will turn to Spanish. Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, señoras, señores, autoridades. Un placer para la CAF participar de este importante evento. Contestando la pregunta que me brindó Brian.
It's great for me to be part of this great event.
En el ámbito del suministro y en el ámbito de la demanda son extremadamente importantes para asegurar una transición energética con equidad, tá? Que es un punto absolutamente necesario en una de las regiones con más grande equidad del mundo, tá? Como muy bien apuntó Glenn ahorita. En términos del suministro, tá? Podemos tener un proceso de modernización de las viejas centrales hidroeléctricas para desde ahí tener una generación más eficiente.
In terms of the supply, it is absolutely important to have more supply and also to create more networks so that we can have an intelligent use of energies in the long term, and also to have a decentralized creation of energy so that we can get to more shared infrastructures in the households and everywhere. It is also important to have regional energy interconnection in the different countries for non-traditional energies, not only in Brazil, but also in many different regions, wherever we can, at transactional prices in a more active way than they have today. On the other hand, speaking on demand, we need to identify more sustainable energies, and that's kind of a challenge in a place where more of 90% of the population lives in cities. And of course, we need to also look at different households and different kind of green households, not only on commercial buildings, and to leave a differentiation what we can do. And transportation is also a key element there. And electric transportation will allow us to go to a more efficient transition. And this electrification needs to be accessible, not only in the physical aspect, but it needs to go to all the population, and it needs to be feasible in the financial aspects. Those are some of the challenges they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. And it's very clear there's a range of challenges there. And of course, a common theme for all of them is the need to drive investment in technology and in changes in energy efficiency. So could I ask you how you see the role of a financial institution like CAF in helping to drive the investment required for energy efficiency?
Por supuesto, estimado Brian, CAF tiene un rol.
Dear Brian, CAF has a very important role regarding all the development banks, and it's a partner to all the national systems as well, in the sense that they support investment that actually accomplishes results. Recently, we are actually taking on the commitment of green energy and up to 40%. So we are doubling the green projects in the next years, and this will have a specific, we will address energy efficiency specifically, and possibly we will encourage the domestic international markets as well. So let's focus, or let's drive our portfolio in this sense. Actually, we recently approved an internal projects that will scale the approvals of $30 million, and with this we will be able to implement the CAF, but we will also assume an active position and to build a network of financial institutions with other multilateral parties that will be part of this effort, and also the World Bank, the Central American Bank, among others. We will try to build a network for the local development banks, specifically the biggest countries in the region, but we will not stop there. Also in Brazil, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Mexico, we will be able to support from these countries the central governments, but also the national governments as well. And with this, we will be able to do the proper leverage for the necessary resources for the International Development Bank, and do implementing this from billions to trillions. This is how the whole international bank they have all this commitment. And also the technical assistance resources that we actively use, and we will be increasing their use, specifically with the energy integration, not just to see this as a big challenge, but also it is our obligation of the CAF, because we also need to promote regional integration. This is part of our commandment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And once again, thank you for the great collaboration we have with CAF and for your support for this Energy Efficiency Training Week. We're delighted to be working with you. And you mentioned there the World Bank. So let me turn now to Demetrios Papathanasiou, who's the Global Director of Energy and Extractors Practice in the World Bank. Demetrios, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you again. And in the context of what we're discussing here, and of course, we're focused on specific goals around Sustainable Development Goal 7. We're talking about energy transition, but of course, we're also living in a very complex world just coming out of COVID, in the context of energy insecurity and everything that's going on right now around the world. So how do you see the place of energy efficiency, and what's your approach to help countries deliver more energy efficiency in this context?
Thank you very much, Brian. It's good to see you, and good morning to all colleagues who are joining here in the Americas. Let me start off by saying that it is an honor for us to join this event today. And I'm very pleased that the World Bank and ESMAP teams have been joining together with the IEA, the government of Panama, and CAF to organize this energy efficiency training week. Let me start off by saying that energy efficiency is at the core of the portfolio that we have in our energy and extractives global practice, and for many of our engagements in developing countries all over the world. And we consider that energy efficiency is one of the key pillars for meeting SDG 7. And with what we see in today's energy markets, with high elevated fossil fuel prices and expectations that high energy prices are going to remain so for the next 12, maybe 24 months, depending, of course, on how the war in Ukraine will evolve further, we think that the world has an opportunity to refocus its attention on energy efficiency. And in contrast with the variety of policies that the world has to deal with energy security questions, the questions of how people can afford energy and how do we make sure that energy remains sustainable, energy efficiency is clearly a no-regret policy. It is one of the things that you can consider investing in and advancing projects in energy efficiency. And it is not one of the cases that the future will change and you feel that you made the wrong investment. So we believe strongly that energy efficiency is key and should be one of the key parameters as the world deals with the current energy crisis and the high elevated prices of energy, but also as we think about the continuation of how do we deal with the energy transition and the climate change issues. We just came out from the spring events here in Washington, and we had the ministries of finance and governors of central banks from all over the world joining, and it is clear that energy issues are now at the forefront of everybody's thinking. People are very concerned. We're just coming out of the health crisis, and we're hitting, the world is being hit by an energy crisis, which is going to delay economic growth, and it's going to really divert attention to short-term solutions rather than the longer-term energy transition that we need. So from our perspective, we want to make sure that, first of all, we have a clear message that we consider energy efficiency paramount as an energy policy for all countries. And we feel that it is really important that we do everything we can to help people invest in energy efficiency. So let me stop here and we can discuss a little bit in more detail on what kind of instruments and activities we can bring on the table. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. And let me ask you for that, if maybe you could say a little bit more about what you think the instruments and actions are, but particularly in the Latin American context, what do you see as either particular challenges or particular opportunities?
So as others have said, the good news about Latin America is that it is a region where the energy intensity and especially the greenhouse gas intensity is relatively low compared to other regions. But I think this is definitely not a reason for complacency. Prices of energy in Latin America are high, like everywhere else in the world, and there is space to bring more improvements. Now, when it comes to energy efficiency, I think it is important to think about it as an investment decision of energy consumers. And what we feel is important is that we provide the set of policies coupled with appropriate financial instruments that will allow consumers, be it firms and industry, all the way down to individual households, that we provide them with the right incentives to invest in energy efficiency. What happens is that most of these investments, because they involve more expensive appliances or improvements in the housing stock, tend to be capital intensive, which means that there's a clear role for financial institutions to enter into that space and provide financing over time and provide financing instruments that can help firms and individuals make the right choices. So it is important that countries have policies that promote this, and I'm sure that as you go in the training, you will discuss a lot of them. Clearly, there can be credits, tax credits for investments in energy efficiency. Countries can help their development banks to focus more on energy efficiency. Plus, it is important to make sure that the right information is available and people can reach it quickly and make the right decisions. I think a combination of the right policies in place, information campaigns, and financial instruments is the way forward. And we're looking forward to working with countries in all of these fronts. We have some great examples of providing innovative financing around Latin America. And certainly, as I said, we feel that energy efficiency is a no-regret strategy. Investments in energy efficiency are safe and they make a lot of sense. And we would like to continue to support that. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Demetrios. Thank you for the strong words about energy efficiency, but also a lot of wise advice there on the actions that could be taken. And I think many of the comments you've made will be picked up during the discussion right across this training week. So thank you very much. And thanks again for the great collaboration and engagement that we have. So let me turn now to Victoria Burroughs, who's the Global Director of Advancing Net Zero at the World Green Business Building Council. Victoria, thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to have World GBC joining us today. And I want to congratulate you on your recent report, Beyond the Business Case, which talks about the wider perspective that one can take when thinking about decisions relating to the built environment, which is very pertinent to the discussion we're having this week. So I thought it might be interesting maybe to ask you first to say a little bit about the key findings of that work for our audience today, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Nice to see you again. And a huge thank you to the IEA and best of luck for your training for this week. So yes, indeed, we launched Beyond the Business Case at COP26 last year, a really important moment for us because the last business case report that we produced was the business case for green buildings in 2013. And since then, the global network has seen the building and construction industry increase their awareness on sustainability and start to differentiate in quantifying the value of our built assets based on their green credentials. And yet we're way off track to achieve our sector goals of total decarbonisation of the built environment, of which, of course, energy efficiency is a core component. And so to do that, we need to increase demand. There is a huge investment opportunity in the green building sector over the next decade, $24.7 trillion, and enormous potential for jobs creation as part of that transition. And we simply cannot afford not to be part of that sustainability movement. And buildings are such an important part of that transition and that process because of the huge amount of carbon emissions and energy consumption our buildings are responsible for. So from an ethical, a financial, risk mitigation or future-proofing perspective, there is a reason, is an opportunity not to be missed, and that we frankly should not be investing in any other type of building. And market action over the past decade has demonstrated that yes, while many leaders are motivated by tackling the climate crisis to influence the global mass market in all geographies and across competing priorities, but especially recently, a broader value proposition that speaks to the core priorities of most organizations is action. And often that core priority is finance, but the secondary core priority is people. And so social value is becoming increasingly a large part of that business case, with greater awareness of social value in recent years. And whilst it's not as easy or simple to financially quantify within the market value of a built asset, the provision of social value really helps strengthen the business case for sustainable buildings. And what our report found was that, you simply, there is no downside to investing in energy efficiency and better buildings, even within the best and most optimistic climate change scenarios. And there are a multitude of economic imperatives and opportunities for investing and developing, designing, constructing, and occupying buildings, which frankly needs a completely new approach. And we highlight 7 ways in our report to identify broader value from a sustainable built environment. Firstly, occupants benefits, so productivity and well-being, providing more comfortable homes and schools and offices more cost effectively. Because as some of the earlier speakers have mentioned, it's not just about how we produce that energy, whether it's renewable sources, it has to be about demand reduction as well. Secondly, life cycle costs, and it can cost less. It can reduce cost, especially if you're considering material reduction as well, or equipment reduction. So thinking about supply chain and construction, but also operational performance as driven by energy efficiency. Risk mitigation, environmental and financial resilience against rising energy costs and the impacts of consumption. Legislative changes, whether you can operate your assets in the future, and of course reputational risks by choosing not to take the sorts of action that we know is possible. Asset values that can be linked to both performance and asset desirability. We're seeing a sort of a trend, not in terms of necessarily increased premiums on value of stock, because that would push the market in the wrong direction, but in terms of desirability. So being able to lease your buildings quicker, sell your properties quicker, and being more desirable spaces to spend all our time in. Investments, a return on investment is stronger, share prices being reflected there, and also increasing ESG reporting requirements becoming a really important consideration of most businesses. Number 6 is access to finance. We're seeing more and more green building market mechanisms being linked to finance now, which is fantastic. And the wider role of business, because decarbonisation makes economic sense, social sense, and environmental sense as well. So we have to go beyond this misconception that sustainable buildings are for those who can afford it. It has to be an essential part of providing safe and affordable homes and cities, and we must work together to ensure that the urban built environment is sustainable for everyone, everywhere.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And you make the case very strongly for greater levels of ambition in green buildings, and energy efficiency is obviously central to that. And you argue very effectively as to why higher ambition benefits people, as well as the overall goals around climate change, energy transition, but also affordability, resilience, etc. But it is a high level of ambition. And I guess a lot of countries would be asking, what are some of the practical steps they can take if they want to advance towards these goals? What are your thoughts on some of the key steps that countries could take?
Yes, indeed. Total decarbonisation by 2050 is an incredibly ambitious goal, but one that we absolutely have to reach towards. Our vision, or really becoming more of an imperative for the sector, is that new buildings should be built and designed to operate at net zero carbon from 2030, and that all buildings, including existing buildings, operate at net zero by 2050. And as we know, that of course it involves a degree of assumption that includes energy efficiency, because we simply can't generate enough energy to supply that demand. And in a region like Latin America, with over 80% of the population living in cities in 2019, achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement requires those ambitious roadmaps and targets, but also the policies that set that clear pathway towards 2050. And so, in the same way that IEA's roadmaps demonstrate that a reduction first approach is critical, so do we champion for that at the World Green Building Council. And we have a series of principles or best practice approaches that we incorporate within our frameworks at a global level, that's then adopted into locally specific programs by our Green Building Councils. But we always champion for reduction first. So firstly, build less, optimizing opportunities for renovation even, and then optimizing things like embodied carbon through lean construction. We constantly need to refer to this as part of a whole life carbon approach. So thinking about energy efficiency and how buildings use energy, but also the materials that go into those projects, because that will also affect how a building performs. And then ultimately having that flexibility of building design as well to extend the life of those buildings as long as possible. And then energy efficiency is extremely, as I've mentioned, core to this concept in both new and existing buildings, to reduce energy demand and optimize how energy is used. And then meeting that balance of reduced energy demands with renewable energy sources. And what we tend to say is that if you can't reach net zero today, which in some cases isn't possible, or even there are regulatory or legislative barriers to achieving net zero in design, try and be net zero ready. So think about how this building could be net zero as either an existing building or a new building, and then work back from there, which is a slightly different approach to what we've taken in the past by designing a building to code and then seeing how we can improve on that, layering on different technologies and approaches. We're now saying, what's the optimum way that this building can perform, and then work back from that. If your building's net zero ready today, it will someday be net zero as part of that transition. And often there's big savings that can be achieved with approaches and tools and technologies that are already in the marketplace and can be cost competitive with some of the ways that we're used to building and operating our buildings. And it can often cost less if it also means you reduce materials or equipment, as I mentioned. So I would really just encourage everyone, whether you're a business owner or even within, spend your time within offices, ask your energy manager as part of your building. If you're a policymaker, set a goal and then constantly evaluate your decisions against that goal. The kind of incremental changes versus systemic change. We need to be chipping away at this, but we're also running out of time. So we need some really quite big systemic changes. And really, that's what our green building councils are doing in terms of supporting local businesses and policymakers understand what this means for you and for your buildings and assets wherever you are around the world. And Colombia in particular, our Green Building Council in Colombia has been working as part of the city's climate action project and with the Building Efficiency Accelerator, starting with Bogota, with the commitment of cities from Monterrey and Cali to update national energy and water and efficiency building codes, requiring that buildings will achieve 20% energy savings and 30% water savings from 2020. And this is going further. Colombia Green Building Council are now part of the Advancing Net Zero program at World Green Building Council to making a commitment to guide the construction industry on its road to net zero and advocating for this topic in both the private sector and within the public sector too. They've been developing an online platform for MRV, for measurement, recording, reporting and verification, and data analysis for all energy and water consumption in Bogota. And that's going to be replicated in other cities. What can we learn from that data about the sorts of measures we can take to enhance our buildings and the performance? Okay. And those energy efficiency policies are now starting to influence decarbonisation roadmaps. And I'm pleased to share that the ministry working with the Colombia Green Building Council to launch a roadmap in June. So now suddenly next month, as part of initiatives to comply with nationally determined contributions aligned with the IEA roadmaps, but providing specific recommendations on the sorts of levers we need at a country level to activate the solutions at the pace and scale that we need. So countries simply cannot achieve their Paris Agreement obligations if they don't address energy efficiency in all buildings and recognise the additional social benefits that this will bring. And I hope this roadmap will provide a really useful tool for Colombia and the wider Latin American region. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks to you, Victoria, and thank you for that inspiration around the level of ambition we need to see, which I know will be discussed all week. And of course, we certainly agree with you, the centrality of energy efficiency in energy transitions and in all parts of the world. So we look forward to seeing your roadmap next month. So thank you for that. I'm going to return now to our host, to Secretary Rivera, the Energy Secretary of Panama. And Secretary, one of the reasons why it's a great pleasure that you're hosting us this week is that Panama is doing such interesting work in the area of energy transitions and energy efficiency. And I know our audience would like to hear a little bit about that. And I'm thinking about some of the policies you've introduced recently, such as the support for solar panels and also the sustainable building regulations. So maybe I'd ask you, please, to tell us a little bit about some of the innovative mechanisms you have put in place to promote energy transitions.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to see you and to say hi. I'm going to switch to Spanish in order to be more fluently in the aspects that we want to share. Efectivamente.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we in Panama, as we mentioned at the beginning of of this, in the opening of the training week, we have an energy transition agenda, and it is important to understand this because for us, energy transition should be seen in an integrated manner. And actually, energy transition is a core part of the process, and especially from the standpoint of the electric matrix, we actually have around 81% coming from renewables like solar, wind, and water. So it makes sense to do the electrification of transportation through electric and renewable energies that are all part of the energy transition agenda. And of course, we should close the gap of the lack of access that we still have in our country. It's a small percentage of our population that still doesn't have access to these sources. That is why we are suggesting to have a partnership and also focused and addressing the sustainable development goals, and we align with the Paris Agreement commitment. And also, and from our standpoint regarding energy efficiency, we wanted to share with you some specific elements, part of our policies, one of which the first is focused on integrating into this type of alternatives the resources. People that don't have sufficient resources that still get subsidies from the state. Those that have a consumption of 300 kilowatts per hour per month, they get a monthly subsidy from the government. So we're suggesting to have a pilot project, which is the installation of small solar panels in households and efficient equipment like refrigeration equipment, and to replace the subsidy of the state that they are actually investing millions of dollars in order to subsidize consumption, and instead having a mechanism that give them an incentive instead of a consumption incentive, an incentive to make this efficient. So as I was saying, the people with low resources, they will have an opportunity to be part of energy transition besides from other mechanisms that we are developing in order to to also reach out to other levels of customers, and also to involve small and medium-sized companies. And also, as Victoria was mentioning, we want to emphasize on the building and construction areas. Also for us in Panama, around 30 to 40% of electric consumption is focused on AC systems. Why? Because of the type of weather we have in our capital city, which is the main point of consumption in our country. But this is an important part of our electric consumption on a daily basis. So we have different standards for this, and they have the most efficient refrigeration and AC equipment standards of the whole region. We have the highest standards. However, we need to work from there. And we have already approved a regulation of sustainable construction and green construction with a series of passive measures from the design and build. Since the design, we need to comply with design requirements regarding AC conditions, focus on energy efficiency in order to have progress in leading to this new type of buildings. And also in our next steps, we are talking about the existing buildings as well. We need to have a mechanism to certified companies, and to issue these green certificates, and to do the retrofitting in order to make buildings more efficient, and not just their equipment, but also talking about the design phase. And of course, this is all part of the energy efficiency strategy that we're mentioning, and the education component, behavior and component is also very, very relevant to move forward. So we are working on that. We are happy to share our projects, and also Given the type of AC systems that we need in our country, and perhaps that other countries are starting to use AC systems in more of a massive scale, what we're doing is that our lessons learned are something that we gladly share with all the countries and institutions. So
Thank you very much, Secretary
all
Rivera.
countries can actually make good use of this.
It's great to hear that the range of actions is really
Sí,
impressive,
es
and
muy
congratulations. One key element that came up among several speakers in relation to this is, of course, finance and investment. We heard from several speakers, not least, of course, the development banks themselves. So how do you plan to address the challenge of financing energy transitions?
Sí, efectivamente, ¿no? Para nosotros es fundamental, sobre todo en países como los nuestros, que no tenemos acceso a grandes recursos fiscales, digamos.
For us, that's so important, especially because we don't have so much access to funding from the government, from taxes. So of course we have to tackle now the effects from the pandemic and from so many things. So that's why I find this question so important. Now we have a funding for energy efficiency that was from so many years ago, but we didn't have access to it due to so many problems we had. So now that we have this holistic view, we have to change. We want to change this fund to a energy transition fund so that we can use it to the different priorities we have. We are now designing it in such a way that it has an agile governance and a flexible governance so that we can use all the funding globally for it, and also to have the funds, the local funding from the banks, from the financial institutions, so that we can use it for the energy transition in better conditions, not only from the public budget, but also from the different financial institutions that we have here, so that we have investment from the different SMEs, and we have different institutions sharing all those opportunities. We are trying to get creative and to understand everyone's situations, to propose all these measures, because funding is basic, of course, but nowadays, with the taxing situations that we were having, is like, okay, there is a big business opportunity here. So let's put them all together with policies, with a clear structure, with a clear governance that will allow us to go forward. We are very optimistic with the results that we will have with it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's very exciting to hear about that. And again, congratulations on your leadership in Panama, in the region. And of course, thank you again for the collaboration we are enjoying in many spheres, as you mentioned, but in particularly for the training this week. So colleagues, we are coming to the end of this panel session. I want to thank all of the speakers, not least, of course, Secretary Rivera, also Deputy Secretary Torres, as well as our speakers, Victoria, Demetrios, Antonio, and Glenn. I think we've heard some really interesting high-level perspectives that will inspire the discussion over the coming few days. So I want to thank all of the speakers very warmly for taking the time to join us today. And then in drawing this panel to a close, our next panel will start in just 2 minutes. So we're just going to take a 2-minute break while we reconfigure for the next panel discussion. So please, everybody stay with us, and we'll see you back in just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again, and welcome to our second panel. I hope you'll all agree that the first panel has given us some inspiration for what we see as the opportunity for energy efficiency in the Latin America region. But one of the things that we always focus on in our training weeks is how do we develop the next generation of energy efficiency policymakers? Where do they come from? That's an investment we really like to make. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce a panel on youth inclusion to ensure secure, affordable access to energy efficiency for clean energy and a just transition for everybody. And for this panel, I'm going to hand over to our moderator, and I'm delighted to introduce Guadalupe Gonzalez, who's Director of Electricity for the National Secretary of Energy for Panama. Guadalupe, the panel is all yours.
I'm going to switch to Spanish because the panel, we're going to have it in Spanish, but we have simultaneous translation. So, comencemos. Realmente yo me siento muy contenta de poder.
I'm very pleased to be moderating this panel, a very high-level panel with 4 young people that have highlighted in Latin America on the work they've been doing on real action to tackle climate change that we need to take seriously. Today, we have them here who will be sharing on the activities that they've been working on in the last few years. And we also have the Sub-Minister of Panama, Rosilena Lindo, who will be also sharing her experience that they had last year in Panama with the ODS7 Academy. Let's start with Joyce Mendes, who was senior expert and also the Sun Power Heaters program leader for Panama in 3 years. She was also an advisor on energy and climate change for the Ministry of the Environment in Panama and leader of the climate change program. On the program of the enhancement of the Panama Channel. Now she is leader on this University of Colony in Germany and working in the University of San Luis Potosí in Mexico and leader of the sustainable policy in Antwerp, Germany. She is an expert on ISO 14001, and she has also worked in the framework of UN climate change experts and chair and vice chair of everything of the work on Latin America for climate change and working with the Climate Energy Agency in Guatemala. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Guadalupe, for that introduction, and thank you to the Energy Agency, and thank you to everyone who is here from the continent, from the Americas, and from other continents. And I'm very happy to be here with all these young men and women focusing on energy efficiency. I'm very pleased to talk to you about the experience we've been having to highlight the role of our young people on this work. And they are actually very important on the role of policies that actually reflect the creativity and the ambition that our young people have to really make sure to have this sustainability from the academia, the private sector, and the public sector. And this is one of the main milestones to have a just and inclusive energy transition. In the way we see our environment will impact our mission for this sustainable transition to grow inclusiveness. And through our strategic mission is how the challenges and how all the associated transformation and the universal access to not only close the gender gap and everything, every challenge we have, we need to take into account that innovation and energy efficiency are key, and we need to see how we really do it, from how we use hydrocarbons to how we do every single change. And communication, research, education, and every single aspect has been an aspect of that, and we need to make visible these elements to have a successful transition, and that's not possible without our youngs. So that's why we make the public policies planning, creating spaces to give a formal voice to our young people, and also boosting their leadership continuously and progressively to build their capacities. Having this in mind, we created a role where our strategic idea is to create a young leaders network to empower them with different creative methodologies so that we can let them know the impact they can have, and to empower their soft skills as well, so that their knowledge can have an incidence on the creation of new policies and to become leaders, so that we can also get the foundations for the ODS 7 Academy, which is the ODS for the SDGs 7. We base this on policy, sustainability, regulation, energy transition, gender transformation, and ecology. And this was a process that was led in 3 months, and now in 2 more weeks we are going to be launching the second generation of this academy. Now, let's check what this academy is about. We start with the 6 models. We start with a general introduction, then with the analysis of the joint work and how the energy, geopolitics, and the regional integration helps you to really make an energy planning with cyber activism that will actually help us to go to social media and to change everything in the society. And finally, it's also relevant to know how to make right public policies that are inclusive, and to have the intention not only to stay in theory, but also to get coaching, where the coaches from the academy, which are also their teachers, give them one-to-one assessment so that they can transfer not only knowledge but also experience. And now here we can see the people that were part of this first generation from our academy. We started with 20 young professionals that were working hand by hand with these first 20 teachers and coaches, working with the Frederick Ebert Foundation and the National Secretary of Energy. And actually, each one of these young people are the face of energy transition. And I truly believe that they are committed, have clear and vibrant ideas, challenging ideas, ambitious ideas to change our planet, which is our home, and they will be protecting our home. And they are highly committed to do so. I'm also convinced that this process is making the right pathway, and they will be able to continue with it. We are boosting their talent, and it's really like a life insurance for us, for everyone, because really boosting all these young people goes beyond planning for the short term. This is the true vision for the long term. It has to go for decades. It has to make sure that gaps are closed forever. And it's not an easy task. We need to share between generations. We need to feed from each other. It needs to share a joint vision on the service of the future. So we need to change our culture from within, from inside, so that we change to a real energy transition. We really need to sculpt, to change it, because yes, we know that technology is a key part of this energy transition to be green, but it also needs to be just and equitable, and it needs to include our youth, who are the key for it to be on the long term. Thank you very much, Sub-Ministry. I truly believe that this experience that we've had in Panama and that you explained so beautifully is an experience that we can replicate regionally and worldwide, and it's already on the platform. We can share, as you said, this experience as a best practice for the world. And it has a very good structure. It's very interesting. And thank you very much for all the time you shared with us today. Now, let's go to our next panel. We have 4 young people, as we said, that are a big example of this milestone that is part of this energy transition, to be part of these clean energies. I will start introducing them. We have Juan Carlos Monterrey, who is an expert of the Obama Foundation for the implementation of COP26. He was the delegate of COP26, actually, on energy transitions from Panama. He was also part of the national group reduce your footprint in Panama. And he is also working in the dry part of Panama, working to restore it. He studied in the Chicago University and he studied economics in the Tulane University.
Joyce Mendes,
We also have Joyce Mendes, who studied technology, is activist and entrepreneur in sustainability in water, food, and in trans-border cooperation. She works in the UK Adaptive Technologies. She represents LAC in the USDG 7 constituency, and she is part of the youth group of Panel 7. She is co-founder of many organizations locally and regionally, such as the Watch Group in Latin America, the Fosto Washu Group, Youth Network for the Water in Panama. She is a member of the Global Parliament for the Water, and she is also part of the Student Energy and Climate Reality Project in Brazil. Welcome, Joyce. We also had Elizabeth Corso Jara, sociologist and social entrepreneur. She has over 3 years as a project coordinator of water access for communities, and she has been awarded for her work with these communities. She is a young representative in CAMER from 2021-2022. And finally, we have Augusto Diaz, who is co-founder of HD Photovoltaic, a startup with different innovations with a product thought for the agro and urban sectors looking for energy transition and poverty eradication. He studied administration and economics, and he is part of many organizations working with youth, sustainable hub, and trainings for leadership. He is now leading many jobs in Chile, Argentina, and Spain, working with them to get to many parts of the region. As you can see, we have 4 exceptional young people from the region, and they are here to share their experiences. So, in this first round, I will ask them to talk about what they've developed in these last years, to talk about their experiences and so on. Please, Juan Carlos, if you could start. Good morning, Guadalupe. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm in Pise, which is one of the warmer areas in Panama. I am now working with the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Energy in Panama. We have been working in projects that have to do with the legal framework to develop less emission markets and also to build capacities. As Roselena was saying, we are trying to get more young people involved in all these programs so that they are part of all the projects from the governments and also from the private sector. I am very glad to be here with you, and I also have a radio program on Tuesdays at 7 where we try to give all this information on energy and policies so that everyone gets to know about all these topics in a friendly manner. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Joyce, can you share us a little bit about you? Of course. Thank you for having me here. Good morning, good afternoon. I've been working with Latin American integration and with the youth, exchanging information, exchanging with the people, and working with all of them on lenses on climate education as well, and also with the Latin American Watching Observatory. We are trying to map and to watch all the regional joint work and how we can impact all that incidence in the energy policies in the region. We are studying the different geopolitical and negotiating frameworks we have in the region. And we are also working with the with the teaching of energy, literacy, and seeing how we can teach them in the different communities, specifically in Paraguay, Brazil, and Uruguay. That's great. Thank you. Elizabeth, can you share with us? I'm from Peru. I've been working in Por Mundo, which is a social enterprise, and we are connecting people without access to energy with different technologies, because there are over 3 million Peruvians in rural communities, indigenous communities, without access to electricity, and they are very vulnerable situations. Their geographic situation is very specific, so it's a complex situation, and we wanted to know their reality, the reality of electric poverty. And now I'm also starting this new initiative with a friend architect, starting to work in the cities with some power and public spaces. But basically, I have been working with energy access and rural communities.
Wonderful. This is something that we need to approach now more than ever. That is actually helping us close the gap, the access gap. So Augusto, please, let's continue with you. Please tell us about your experiences. Hello, good morning, Guadalupe. Thank you so much for the introduction. As Guadalupe said, I am Augusto Diaz. I am the leader of HD Photovoltaica. Currently, it is an initiative where we innovate and we have the IPV solution that allows for the integration of PV energy in different areas where conventional sources couldn't be implemented without the infrastructure. So these can be used in greenhouses, rural housing, offices, parking lots. That it's a wide array of projects. As you can, for you to have an idea, we have an approximate of 3.5 kilograms per meter, which eliminates 3 tons of carbon per year, which allow us to plant many trees per year. We are now in an scalability phase. We have a consolidated product, but always in the looks or always looking for this optimization. So I appreciate the time that you and the space that you gave us, so everybody can be trained and educated in these topics. Actually, so thank you so much to you, Augusto, and to all 4 panelists. Of course, we know about the actions that you're developing, and we know that these are not easy to be conducted, these type of projects and actions. We know that there are other groups of youth the other youth groups that are interested in this. So we want to know from your perspective, from what you have experienced in the last years, can you please share some of the challenges you have faced when actually pushing these new projects in your countries, in your regions, and as young people, how can you face this? How have you faced these challenges? How have you addressed these challenges? We're really interested because we want to know the youth perspective, of course, and the youth audience. Actually, I want to be very, very honest, and I want to emphasize the fact that Panama has contributed to youth inclusion for many years already with the Leaders Academy, a Climate Change Academy. We have the ODS 7 Academy, and Panama has the youngest delegation to represent a country in the negotiations of climate change. So for me, it wasn't difficult to be involved because since the beginning, I had a lot of support. And like, for example, I have worked with you personally and with the officers from the energy department, environmental department, but this is not the case for everybody. Still, we are a long way to go. And three things that I have identified is the lack of access to formal and informal projects that train young people on climate change, terminology, and actually and how everything is interlinked. Panama started the process with the Youth Academy on Climate Change, and now with the ODS 7 Academy and with the Youth Academy on decision making for the national development and the different energy plans made by the energy department. But we can still do much more, which is more in the space of formal education, educational programs that talk about these topics in depth, and not just 1 week or 1 month dedicated to the topic, and also to this matter, and also the opening formal spaces where young people are being taken into account and that their vision is taken into account in the government investment and decision plans. I think in Panama we have always been open. We have always opened this space, but we can open it even further, and we can involve more young peoples, and we need more resources as well. Sorry. In Panama, Senacid, they have a series of initiatives where many young people actually participate. And I think in order to drive this agenda, energy transition agenda, we need to have funds. We need funds to spread them across the country, and so the youngsters across all the country can actually move forward with their projects. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing Panama's vision. Definitely, we have been working in the creation of these spaces, but as you were saying, we still need more communication, more education, more training. We're working towards that. Let's listen to the voices of other countries. Joyce, please tell us from your experience what have been the main challenges you have faced and how have you faced them? Yeah, of course. I think that one of the barriers would be that as young people, we're not just here because we are young. It's also because of our experience. So once, let's say that you are studying, you already want to make changes while you're still a student. You don't need to have a PhD to actually make some changes in your community. Sometimes this is just a limitation, the lack of experience, the lack of a formal experience. So what we have basically done is we have provided training, we want people to learn, but we need to self-train in order to reach those levels of those academic levels in order to do part of a project. So actually, in a personal perspective, as a foreign migrant and immigrant, and it's said, and it's actually the fact that people judge you, even though you have received all this education, people start wondering, why are you working in this sector and not in other areas. Is still there is prejudice, and the fact that I don't know, if I have studied engineering and I'm working on certain matters, looks like there is still some bias from my experience. But there is a lot to do still in order to mitigate this and to decolonize this knowledge and also decolonize the names of the people, because energy transition is for everybody and it should be inclusive, and also they all have a voice in it. And in a certain way, there is certain pessimism from certain stakeholders in the industry, because they say this is the status quo, this is the way we have worked always and we will continue this way. There is also pressure because of climate change. And for example, in my region, in Paraguay, we this is autumn and it's 43 degrees Celsius. So we really go through the impacts of climate change. And this is something that we live at regional level as well. But this happens in the big cities and with the decision makers, and somehow there is an inaction, lack of action time frame. Well, we have been working on that, and these are the main challenges we have faced. That's wonderful. Thank you. I think, as you were saying, everyone can contribute to move forward with energy transition. And what matters is to really contribute, because we are all a community. And that's basically what I want to highlight from your comments. Elizabeth, please share with us what are the three main challenges you have faced and how have you overcome them? Well, actually, listening to Panama's experience is very interesting, because it is noticeable that you have developed many initiatives for young people. It's something that in Peru, in terms of energy, we haven't really made such progress. So I do believe that it's very, very important to listen to this type of insight. So in the case of the challenges we have faced, I think the fact that we need the spaces for the initiatives to move forward with the youngsters, and this is one of the most complicated things, is more about being self-centered. That is very strong. And I think when you're very young, you don't have the capacity to issue your own opinion, and especially in terms of climate change. I think this is very generational, and this comes from a very young generation that is actually, I mean, it wasn't the priority for previous generations, but now it is for us. And also there is a gender component, being a woman and in a chauvinist country is very complex. It happened to me many times, and whenever I am leading a project, they always think that the coordinator is a man and it is my colleague who's a man. So this gender gap, not just the generational gap, is a huge challenge when we're talking about energy or energy policies, also that are normally led by certain groups, by certain people, by certain sectors, especially. Yeah, definitely, Elizabeth. What you were saying regarding energy transition is something that needs to be in the mind of every developer. Augusto, tell us your experiences in this regard. What are the main challenges and how have you faced them? Well, yes, Guadalupe, I agree with Elizabeth regarding the decisions that Panama is making. I celebrate, and my compliments to them on what they're doing, because 3 years ago when this idea was created, was born, actually it has been very, very helpful. From my own experience, what I can say, at the beginning we had to take into practice an idea that was not existent at the moment, and there were certain obstacles that I encountered. There were different types of financing that I had to come up with, and in a country when innovative policies regarding energy transition are not yet fully developed. So I had the opportunity to do this with my own funds, and my own financing, but not everybody can do the same. And how many young people are there in the world with such fantastic ideas but cannot make them come, cannot make them a reality? So it is important also to have real visibility of the project. And in 2020, when the pandemic and the strict lockdown started, I started investing in researching beyond the region, and I started creating a network of different of contacts. And I'm part of a global network that gave me many opportunities and opportunities to connect with other stakeholders from the world. And also we give feedback and they give me feedback. And also I found great opportunities in different projects and in order to test our product, because we're talking about a product that didn't exist before, and very clearly I found the first project to implement my product. It was a huge challenge, but I was lucky to find our first companies, which were private developers, which are important stakeholders. They were able to trust us, and we received feedback from the first customer, and we were able with this to innovate and to refine our product. And also, it is very important the intellectual property as well. We need to have ownership. And well, these were some of the challenges that we encountered at the beginning of the project. Ale, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Augusto, because definitely these are 4 experiences, 4 different challenges that make us think. And I'm sure that just as you, we have many, many young people across the region that are trying to move forward and to push forward an idea. What they actually need is to have or to be in touch with someone that can advise them, that can include them somehow. So with this in mind, and just to close the panel, I would like to know, I would like to hear some recommendations and advice from you to the policymakers, to the main stakeholders, so you can also, so they can also all be engaged in energy transition and with a more inclusive view with the young population. I do think that it is important to follow Panama's example, especially in these formal and informal places where young people can be trained and understand the whole situation and the problematic in order to focus on sustainable, resilient social aspects. And also, we need to conduct communication campaigns that are very much focused on the matter. We all understand that things that need to be done, but most of the population doesn't understand this. Most of the population is concerned for their daily lives. We just went through a pandemic. We are going through an energy crisis. So there are many problems that actually affect everybody. So energy transition or climate change looks very far away. So we need to create awareness. We need to connect this with what happens on a daily basis in all households and with the different countries that we want to develop this. So we really need to talk a lot about this. We need to talk with our colleagues, with our family members, with our friends. And if we have the chance to be in an area where there are decision makers, we need to remember about the relevance. We need to remind them of the relevance of this issue. And I want to tell all young people here, please, just dare. Nobody's going to be 100% ready. We will always believe we are imposters, and we will all think that we just can't. But the first step is to talk to everybody, is to talk to someone and to get involved. To talk with the stakeholders is very, very important. If you want to get involved on the policy side, please get involved in in politics, in diplomacy, and how can you be engaged with this? Because at the end of the day, it's the government who establishes the path on how these regulations will take place. And especially what excites me is policies. So please just go ahead, get involved, and get engaged, participate. That's my advice for decision makers. Also, take us into account. Policymakers, please do take us into account. Otherwise, we are going to make more disruptive action. Wonderful. Okay. Elizabeth, what advice can you provide? Joyce, sorry. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, Joyce, go ahead. Yeah, sure, thank you. Especially, I believe it is very important. This is very important. It is important to take into account and highlight our knowledge, our capacities. Sometimes we like talking about cooperation, about existing partnerships, and what partnerships can we actually, where can we get together and create based on initiatives and build upon that. And we need to understand that it's a cross-sectional and a transversal issue, energy transition. So as young people, we need to have this versatility from like, we need to be trainers, educators, engineers, policy makers. We need to understand all different aspects. We need to be trained. And also, we need to be perseverant in the sense that, as many people, as my colleagues were saying, at the beginning, we need to be persistent. And it's not the fact that you are being owed by others because of your project. You start receiving support from your community, and in community, you can also talk about inclusion and also talking about an inclusiveness. And also to have a global situation analysis and take it down to a local level and to a local vision. Talking about inflation, we understand that this is related to the politics of energy. So these are processes that do have an impact in our daily lives. So we need to make people understand this. We need to create awareness among people, whether it's in your household, government, region. This is fundamental so people can be empowered and feel and start feeling like they are a part of the puzzle of energy transition. Thank you for your comments, Joyce. Elizabeth, you have the floor. Yeah, of course. What I would say first is that we need to have an intergenerational approach with public policy. So that means that decision makers and authorities should include participation and consultation processes for young people that are not only used as a campaign or as an instrument. They make these participatory spaces, but sometimes they're called participatory, but at the end of the day, it's just to tick a box. It's just for us to say that they do have inclusion, but they are not really inclusive at the end. We really need roadmaps. We need to have programs. So we need real engagement, real participation from the youth in our country, and especially for the youngsters we want to talk about. Well, the youth should be focused on developing innovative solutions for energy transition, focusing on energy challenges in our countries at regional level. So I know very well that each country has a different problem, is facing different problems. So we have almost 70% of young girls and that have difficult access to energy or to power. People still using candles because they don't have access to electricity that damage their health and because they don't have sufficient resources. So we should start creating solutions, doing entrepreneurships as well, and also these are issues related to other energy policies. So we shouldn't make and try to avoid making the same mistakes and avoiding these power dynamics. And finally, we want to be able to know other experiences. So I didn't know about this. It's about also implementing pilot projects in other countries. and learning from other experiences, I think that would be wonderful as well. So, Augusto, what is your advice? Okay, my recommendation for the young people is, and for the youth, is to get involved and to use these spaces. Even though there is a lot of work to be done, there are many more opportunities for the youth today in the world, more than 3 years ago. So that is why I feel lucky to be here and sharing my experiences with you as well. And regarding, recommendations for policymakers, and I would say don't be resilient and to give more global opportunities, to make opportunities more global. Well, for example, before in Argentina, we know that in Argentina we don't have the same opportunities as in Panama or in Europe. But even if in my case, my project, I have been able to extrapolate my project and my actions into I have taken them to other countries. I haven't been able to take this to the US or other Latin American countries because I am in Argentina. So let's imagine if you're able to develop a project and implement it without financing. I mean, young people should be able to receive this type of economic support, financing, or also just it would be enough just to be heard, just to be trained on workshops, just to use the potential of the youth. And I think it's amazing. I think policymakers and stakeholders are starting to realize this. So I celebrate this meeting that just took place and this panel. Thank you so much, Augusto. In general, well, as we have realized and we have heard from 4 experiences across the region, Panama, Paraguay, Brazil, Peru. We have heard about the different aspects of the energy sector from different sectors like access, innovation, public policies, observatories. You are all following up on energy action. And just to highlight some of the main ideas of this panel on the insights, what young people are looking for is an opportunity, a space to be heard. They are still looking for it. There are some countries that little by little are becoming more open. However, still there is a lot to be done, a lot to develop, and to the youth, and we want to ask them to dare to participate, to be engaged, to make questions, to knock on doors, and to challenge. There is a lot to be done with energy transition. Mostly we should make efforts, and we should include the insights and the opinions and standpoints that we can all contribute with, and the decisions that need to be made. I mean, we are still just 8 years away, and from 2030 we need to comply with the SDGs, and we need to be stronger and more resilient. So just to conclude the panel, I want to thank you all 4 panelists for your participation. I think it's been quite an interesting panel, and I think those the young and not so young that have heard and have listened to this panel this morning, please do take this home with you, because we're looking for many more spaces and the youth is willing to support you. So with this, we want to thank you, and we want to thank the Undersecretary for the introduction at the very beginning of the panel as a keynote speech, with the openness to the experience of Panama. And we are willing to share our experience with the regions, with the countries of this region, in order to replicate these efforts. So let's give the floor again to the IEA and we are really appreciative of the space within the framework of this training week. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Many thanks, Guadalupe, and all our panel members. And thanks for the kind of inspiration that's being shown by our youth leaders here, talking about barriers, but talking about opportunities too. and how we can all make a difference to our clean energy transitions. Clearly, it's very hard work, and we need to be very persistent. But thank you for all of that. I hope that, as I said in the introduction to this section, the training weeks are all about investing in the future. They're about finding the next generation of policymakers. So I hope with some of that inspiration from our speakers and the training for the rest of this week, we'll all be able to work together towards these clean energy transitions. We're going to move on now to the final panel of the day. And this is on the role of energy efficiency in securing affordable energy and access to energy at the same time, in those things hand in hand. And for this, I'm delighted to be able to introduce our moderator, who's Virginia Zalaket, who's currently the Lecturer of Energy Efficiency Diploma at Pontificia University of Chile. So, Virginia, please, the panel's yours.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to switch to Spanish, as part of this panel would be in Spanish and Portuguese. And I remind that there is simultaneous translations in both languages. Muy buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Good morning, all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation to facilitate this panel. We have 4 distinguished panelists that will give a brief presentation each, and then we will talk about the role of energy efficiency in securing affordability from the economic standpoint and access to energy in the region. And we will we will have a space for Q&A. Energy efficiency is changing when technologies are being developed. This is good news, but it's also a challenge that we need tools and more financing. Not always new development is economically feasible or are affordable at the beginning. So many times we need the support from the public sector so technologies can be deployed and have an effect of consumption and reduction of the use of energy. One example of it is digitalization of energy efficiency, energy technologies, and they have to be inclusive because there are places in the world, in Latin America, that don't have an access to energy, so they don't have access to internet, and that means that we don't just need to secure affordability, but also access to energy across the globe to be able to enjoy the benefits of energy efficiency. The goal of this panel is to contribute to dialogue on how to make vision into action and how to talk about the multiple benefits that energy efficiency can provide to the government, the private sector, and society, and to exchange experiences and ideas across the region and to identify collective strategy and opportunities to use energy efficiency as a relevant tool to secure affordability and access to energy. So to get into the topic, I want to introduce you to the first panelist, Ms. Maisela Reynoso. She's an energy policy specialist of OLADE and that are working in topics related to energy. It is about the access to knowledge and good practices in order to accomplish sustainability and good reputation in the energy sector. Maisela, she's a mechanical engineer. She has a master's degree in production and exploitation of hydrocarbons, energy governance, a specialization in in project management, and the design of public policies. Maisela, she is from Ecuador, and she made the first energy efficiency plan for the hydrocarbon sector in our country. You have the floor, Maisela.
Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm pleased to be here, and I also want to highlight the previous panel because it was a great one, and I think that we all need to take everything that they said into consideration. Now, I want to take a little background on where we are now in this energy efficiency transition. Next slide, please. In 19 years, from 2020 to 2019, Latin America has made an improvement on the energy efficiency improvement. We've reduced energy intensity and energy final consume per capita has increased. Now, on energy prices, we have a very wide diversity in the different countries, and that has to do with the diversity of energy use and also the prices. Some countries have subsidies and different taxes for these prices. Now, let's see what are the energy consumptions in Latin America and the Caribbean. In Central America, the main consumer is households and then transportations. In the Andes and the South America is transportation and the industrial sector. Differently from that, in the Caribbean, the industrial sector is the main consumer, and then transportation and household, who follows very closely. The pandemic didn't change the consumption in the region. It only slightly changed in transportation, who reduced a little bit, and it slightly increased on household because of the lockdowns. Now, let's see our challenges and opportunities on the efficient consumption of energy. Prices are not aligned with energy efficiency. We also see that efficiency is not so tangible. So many times, savings are not as attractive as incomes would be. Now, let's also see technological challenges and barriers. We have many obsolete technologies and limited access to technology. And at the same time, we see that knowledge and training are also of limited access. On the regulatory framework, we don't see efficient use in a high hierarchy on public policies. And even in some countries, it is not even part of the policies. We also see that institutionalizing it is not efficient. Now, speaking of cultural barriers, we can see that wealthy people have a point of view that think the short term is more important than the long term. And there is a rejection to get advice from foreign people or advisors. And there's also a difficulty to change processes culturally. Now, regarding information, it's very expensive to change the line of information, so it will also be very difficult to change our objective. And thinking on the political context and the cultural context, we need to think in a comprehensive way, and we really need to check the specific context of the country. Speaking on funding, we don't have specific energy markets in all the countries because we are not aware of all the specific financial tools that can be used in each one. But what can we do? What are the next steps? First, we need to acknowledge that all the problems are very complex, that need to be structured, analyzed, and that are not specific to the energy sector. Also, pricing are part of public economic policies and need to be treated like that. We also need to implement public policies taking into account all the environment in the country, the society, the culture, and the economics. And it's also important to take the energy matrix that is now depending specific on hydrocarbons. We have made an important progress on the framework of energy efficiency, but so far that is just one element of the policy. So we need to emphasize the use of many other elements of the policy. One of those is institutions. We need to keep strengthening visualization and institutionalization. It's not specifically a technical aspect, but we also get to a position where our agenda includes every single aspect of energy efficiency. Thank you very much, Maisela, for such an interesting presentation. Our next panelist is Rubén Contreras Lispirgue, who is the leader officer on energy in CEPAL. He has 25 years working on agriculture, climate change, and energy. He has made research in the Antarctic and at the OAS, and he was the main officer in IRENA. He's been working as a leading officer in energy for CEPAL. He is an engineer with a master in energy and risk reduction, and he has a PhD on renewables. The floor is yours, Rubén. Good morning, and thank you, Virginia, for your introduction. I want to greet the International Energy Agency and thank you for having me here. I just want to know if I'm going to control the presentation or if you are. Okay, next slide, please. I don't want to repeat all the things that Maisela already presented, but I think that we need to have information to be able to discuss the subject that we are touching here. And from CEPAL, we knew that we didn't have such information to be able to assess energy efficiency. And this is a challenge that it's not technical, but that has to do with rollout of staff. Because every certain time we had to start training again with this rollout, and people didn't know what was already done and so on. And there are just a few countries that have long-term plans. In the years that I've been at CEPAL, we have had 17 national reports, and we have a comprehensive database with information up to 2016 and has up to 80 indicators on energy efficiency. This is just to give you a information. There you have the link where you can find it. We have information from Uruguay, Mexico, who have been working on decades on this work, and also from other countries such as Panama, Brazil, Chile, that have been recently improved a lot on uploading data. There you can see a graphic and a map that you can download from our site. Another thing we're working on is that there are many databases on energy efficiency, but none of them analyzes it. So here we had a screenshot on the information that you can find, which is a database on public policies where all the countries upload all the policies they have. We have the differences between a plan, a strategy, and so on, because of course all not countries have them. And the idea is to assess all those policies with indexes to understand in which countries these policies have had an impact and in which it hasn't had. This is also the type of information you can find it, which is helpful when you want to take informations, like how to assess energy intensity, if you are going to do it by GDP, by counting weight, or if you are going to do it by infrastructure type, which is very complex as well. I am presenting this slide in particular because energy intensity by itself is saying nothing. It's just saying, okay, they used an amount by this specific unit, but it doesn't really say why or anything more specific. But in this slide, we can see that from 2010 to 2018, there were some countries that had a decrease of intensity and some others that had an increase. So maybe it was because of the change of the matrix they were using or the infrastructure they were having. This is a very brief summary just to understand what we are measuring and why we need to have relevant information. And these energy efficiency database that we've been working on, because it's a very comprehensive one. And we hope to be working with a survey in different countries that will be giving us a right-free information from different countries, and also to be seeing the infrastructure changes that they have been having, because just to have the intensity information is not giving us all the perspective. And just to wrap up, it's also an important thing that CEPAL has been working on from 2020, which is energy poverty, because we've seen that there was no methodology to study such topic. There were no indexes or nothing, no methodology. Like if there was a family spending 10% of their income, okay, but that's just for developed countries. We cannot take that for countries such as in Latin America, because some families could spend up to 2%. Of course, income is different in developed and developing countries and such. So we can see that some trend that it's very strong in Latin America is that building standards are not present. So people in those households have very poor conditions on energy efficiency. It's just from the last 5 years that we have started to develop such conditions. And we also developed a methodology standard last year to start to measure this energy poverty. And speaking of energy efficiency, we also need to take technology into account, because in Latin America, it's almost a luxury. A mid-income family, if they want to buy a highly efficient refrigerator, they need to pay a lot of money. We in Latin America haven't focused on cooling and heating neither because of the costs. Maybe in transportation a little bit, but we don't have vehicle factories. We are just assembling factories. So of course, in Europe, they are innovating and in all those policies, but in Latin America, we have a very different context. But of course, we can implement in technology access, building, and so many other aspects, and also in the infrastructure quality, because we know that we have a lot of deficiencies on thermal aspects. I think that's all I want to share for now, but thank you for having me again. Thank you, Roberto, for sharing with us the experience from CEPAL. Now, I want to introduce Rodrigo Bacelar de Bandes from Bandes. He is from Rio de Janeiro. He studied finance and leadership. He became part of the National Development Bank in Brazil in 2019, and he has been part of the financial development part of the bank. Now he is working with the distributed energy section. Now the floor is for Rodrigo Bacelar.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Virginia. I'd like to also greet our colleagues here in the panel and to thank for the invitation
and thank you for the invitation for having me here and giving me the opportunity
of being here with you and discussing energy efficiency. I'm going to talk about the experience of the NDES and the Brazilian market. So my perspective is actually from Brazil and not really from Latin America or South America.
Can we pass the first slide, please?
Brazilian perspective.
That's it.
So this image shows
that graphic
that in the past 30 years, in terms of
in the last 30 years,
emissions of greenhouse effect gases, the major responsible for that has been the problem of deforestation. And in the past 30 years, we see that there's been a reduction.
Land forest and use.
And this emissions, they have industrial processes and energy processes that have increased very much. They basically doubled in the past 30 years. And those were the segments where energy efficiency can give major contribution. Brazil is the main consumer of energy, responding for 36% of all the final consumption of energy that is consumed in South America. So next one, please. Now, going on to the topic of energy efficiency, what would be the main challenges, barriers, and opportunities for the market to make progress? In our perspective, in our bank, there are many challenges to be faced. The promotion of new standards of clean technology, generation of power, also industrial challenges, improvements in transport infrastructure, especially in urban mobility, the public transportation in urban areas, and in the issues of energy efficiency and infrastructure of low carbon infrastructure to be expanded, an increase in energy security, access to clean energy and good quality energy, and also the resilience of cities. These would be the major challenges for us to face in the coming years. In terms of barriers for Brazil, we were able to identify, for example, the absence of knowledge of the market, be it banking or the companies, in terms of risks and benefits of energy efficiency, as well as technologies available today, limited capacity of the energy efficiency company, and also expert consultants on energy to manage the pipeline of projects of energy efficiency that can be feasible. And we also identify an absence of financial mechanisms that are adequate for energy efficiency projects because of excessive bureaucracy and demands and collaterals that are demanded by companies, and especially on to smaller companies. And the lack of regulatory incentives that we normally see here. So in terms of opportunities, there are many. We highlight the possibility of the promotion of credit for small and medium-sized companies, increase the productivity of these companies as being a major push for economic recovery through a sustainable production basis, creation of new quality jobs, and increase of institutional capacity, technical knowledge, evaluation, and done by banks and other financial institutions. So I'd like to highlight and to give you an example, illustration that BNDES had with LAG, the program of electrical conservation program, and to guarantee credit for projects of energy efficiency. And this program will start now in July this year, the first phase. And the objective and what is going to be promoted by this project is to give 80% coverage for banking operations that will finance projects of energy efficiency for small and medium-sized companies in Brazil. And through this program that can be understood as a guarantee fund, we intend to increase the number of energy efficiency and also changing this potential that we have today into real projects, and with that save power, and that can also be associated to new generation and also the distribution of renewable energy that can be implemented as a result of that. This program is also going to work with the promotion of basis of public information on this energy efficiency projects, providing better knowledge on the market and institutional capacity building and regulatory suggestions to create a favorable environment and to leverage energy efficiency actions and to also to scale then investments. With that, we expect to increase institutional capacity, technical knowledge, monitoring and evaluation practices through the banks, and to channel private capital for projects that can be environmentally sustainable. So that was a summary, and I am available for the discussion when the time comes for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for giving us the perspective of what Brazil is doing and for what you wanted to share. Now, I have the honor to present Jose Antonio Ortega from the Development Bank. He is senior specialist in energy, and he works with the energy sector in the Inter-American Development Bank. He is economist in the National Mexican Autonomous University, and he has also worked in Bariloche in Argentina, and he has a master in an MBA from the National Institute in Mexico. Now the floor is his. Thank you, Virginia, and thank you to the IEA for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel. I also want to greet Edith Bayer for organizing this panel. Next, please. So let's see where we are at in the energy efficiency. Let's see where are our main areas of action on energy efficiency and also what's the impact we have had. This is based on a query we did with experts on the topic, and also to know which were the most relevant. The first one is the institutional that Maisela also mentioned. So to say which are the ones that are designing, implementing the policies and the programs and tools that we are using. Here at the regional level, we only have a 20% improvement. It was done by country, and it is very important in our region. The second action framework that we need to take is going to implementation. So not to only have the vision, but also to take action on that. So we need to take action, we need to implement it to get the results. So which are the different tools and mechanisms and promotion and funding that we need? And I talk about promotion because we need this culture among the policymakers, the culture, the stakeholders that are taking this. And we are only on the 2.8% from the goal that we have. We also have the legal framework, which is very important, laws and regulations, and there we only have 3%. The fourth one is the norms, because it's very important to have all the equipment who have all these norms, and there we only have 3%. We have all this information in the study with the names of all the equipment who already have been following the labeling, the standards, the mandatory and voluntary standards and labeling. And the next one is the policies, because if we are not able to have this baseline, then it's very hard to really know which is the potential and the basis to really achieve our goals. And that doesn't allow us to have a good assessment of all our projects. So we need to have all those. And the final one is to really know how relevant is for the countries in our region to get energy efficiency as one of the main axes on their policies. So in the general aspect, we can see that we have only get to the 32.6%, but at a regional level, there's a lot to do. And in this context, we are facing some challenges and opportunities. I am not going to mention all of them, but of course, we are facing the prices and taxes and subsidies that could be a lot more efficient in the different markets to really use energy in a more efficient way that contribute to the different households' economies. We also have limited access to credits. I follow CEPAL's research very closely, and they detail all our improvements in these aspects. And I thank Ruben, everything he shared. I recommend greatly to go to IBER to find out everything that they share. I also think that uncertainty about savings is a great challenge that we face. So it's actually surprising to see how distribution is getting a lot more attention than all the savings. We have a lot to do with it. We have a lot of opportunities like high potential and high environmental affordability of this energy. And we need to take a lot more advances on digitation. And we also need to work more on the final use of energy. We need to see how to reduce our costs through the digital media that we already have, and we can use them to assess the energy use as well. We also need to contribute to CO2 emissions mitigation, the work generation and innovation generation is also useful. And how can we guarantee that energy is feasible and that is affordable? Well, we have achieved it in 97% on lightning, but we have a lot to do with to do on that aspect still. On refrigeration, we are still in an 88.5%. In communication, we are now in a 66%. And on cooling, we are in 36%, because as Rodrigo was saying, all these technologies on heating and cooling is not accessible in the region. And something that for us is quite important and that we need to take into account with a gender perspective as well is the access to laundries, electric laundries, because many people is still washing by hand because they don't have access to such equipment. So all of these will have access to many other technologies as well. We need to take into account all the differences that these will make to their lives, because sometimes we just think that they will have less costs for electricity, but it will also change their lives. And we need to also make accessible other electricity and electric types of equipments for them. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Jose Antonio, for your interesting presentation. I think your fellow panelists have also shared very interesting insights on what is happening and what they see from the perspective of their own organizations in Latin America. So I would like to start with a round of Q&A. I want to start with Maisela. So based on Olade's experience, Maisela, what can you tell us? What has been the main progress in Latin America as a region and main challenges as well? Can you tell us something about this? One of the best progress we have had is identifying the gaps of energy deficiency, because from gaps we see opportunities being created to improve an efficient consumption. Then today we have great repository of energy efficiency projects, but we need to improve and adapting these measures to the context of each country. And I would like to refer to the difference of the energy matrices of the countries and the way they implement measures in a country whose energy consumption is mostly non-renewable and different to others that have more renewable resources. This is a room for improvement. We need to adapt our measures better for energy efficiency in the context of each country. Very well. Thank you so much, Maisela. Now, or next, I would like to ask our colleague from ICLAC on the main progress in terms of energy efficiency and what are the opportunities he sees. Thank you, Virginia. You were cut off. Your signal was cutting off. But I do want to tell you that on the one hand, countries have learned that it's necessary. Regarding information, it's necessary to have information. We cannot just make a decision regarding an investment without clear information, without clear data on the sectors or where the proper investment needs to be done. For energy efficiency, it is difficult to invest money properly in this type of projects. So what we want to contribute with is we want to focus on that, on information, and many countries are actually giving information on the expenditures of households regarding energy efficiency that allows us to know more in depth what is happening. On the other hand, regarding technical cooperation, well, we need to keep on working on avoiding duplication, for example. We have worked on this with the IDB. I don't know if Jose Antonio knows about this, but we have shared our database with the IDB to place it in their energy hub, so there is more dissemination of information, so more stakeholders of the sectors know that information exists, that there are second level indicators, and we're working with the third level indicators, and we're working on that. So that is very, very important, because as I was saying, the high turnover of public officers actually has an impact on everything that wants to be developed, all the projects that want to be developed. There are no national programs, there are only government projects. Once there is an administration, they do a project, and then when there is a new administration, they don't continue the project, there is no continuity. So we need to work on that perspective, and in increasing the collection of information and more understanding from the governments on this problematic as well. I'm sorry, she is muted. Without question, continuity is very relevant to actually move forward with these programs, and we need a lot to create continuity more than plans. So in that sense, we have seen this as well in many countries in Latin America. So I would like to ask Rodrigo now, next, from BNDES, regarding your experience in energy efficiency investments, what are the key elements to move forward with an energy efficiency project. Rodrigo, please.
Eu avalio que a gente pode dividir assim em projetos menores, que em geral são projetos mais voltados para as empresas de comércio e serviço, eu diria tickets abaixo de $200 mil, por exemplo. Entendo que seria importante ter programas de crédito simplificado por parte dos bancos, em que se possa padronizar projetos típicos de eficiência energética, por exemplo, projetos de refrigeração, iluminação, climatização, troca de equipamentos antigos por equipamentos eficientes, ou seja, os projetos que ocorrem com muita frequência e que seria mais fácil desenvolver calculadoras e esteiras de crédito simplificado. Já para o segundo tipo de projetos, que são os projetos industriais, que envolvem investimentos maiores, tipos de financiamento mais elevados, eu entendo que é fundamental contar com um especialista experiente, seja um maestro ou um consultor de energia, que possa fazer um bom diagnóstico energético e uma estimativa do retorno financeiro daquele projeto. Isso é uma informação fundamental para um banco que quer dar crédito. Agora, em ambos os casos, o mecanismo...
Because it is something important for everyone. It is a method to guarantee a success. It is fundamental to guarantee the perception of risks in the banks. In some countries, it is important to get the perception of risks and benefits. And in this fundamental step, we could get a methodology to reduce the perception of risks by banks. It is really important to do that.
Bien.
Very well. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Now I would like to continue with my next question for Jose Antonio. Jose Antonio, from the IDB standpoint, how can we use energy efficiency to boost economic and social recovery? What are the benefits that you might highlight? You want to highlight? Thank you for the question, for excellent facilitation of this panel. I really acknowledge the efforts you have done. I think that in Latin America and the Caribbean, the boost of energy efficiency have been through the development of the market of equipment and financing. This is implicitly, we have a need to have trained personnel and train in this regard. So I'm really sure that a good example of what has been done and the impact of unemployment is a report published by the IEA's report of July that says that for every $1 million that is invested for the the upgrading of remodeling and upgrading of building and replacement of equipment and its contribution, I say that with every $1 million we create jobs in construction and manufacturing of equipment. So that is a fundamental component in terms of commercialization, support centers, and financing, the development of consulting services, maintenance of equipment. I think this is fundamental and necessary for the program. Just as an example, in the program implemented by Mexico, in the case of fridge replacement in 2016 was classified as counter-cyclic in terms of an economic recovery that we went through in Mexico at that point. Thanks so much, Jose Antonio. Yeah, sometimes the drivers of programs are not necessarily the same, but these are all energy efficiency programs that are highly positive. I would like to ask Maisela, from OLADE's standpoint, how should we move forward with the support of energy efficiency in the region? What are the lessons learned throughout these years? First of all, I want to mention that energy efficiency programs, they have to be leveraged by energy policies, and to acknowledge the importance of this, and financing and creation of a regulatory framework. So once we have these plans based on policies, then we should look at the local governments with the including in the agenda the associated problems. And why local governments? Because many times local governments have jurisdiction for these new regulations on transportation management of solid waste, and in some situations they also have ownership on the electricity generating companies. Thanks so much, Marcela. Yes, as a matter of fact, I agree that all programs should be supported by public policies, all the energy efficiency programs. I think in that case, there is, work is being done and efforts are being done by the government and NGOs like yours. So now I want to ask, when from a class to Ruben, from a class standpoint, I mean, you have a wonderful project and now you have the energy poverty indicators, how to strengthen indicators to show the best value of energy efficiency. Thank you, Virginia. I think this is one of the greatest challenges in the sense that those are policymakers should understand the importance of energy efficiency. I think you have already discussed this. It is really, I mean, they have been very strong on adopting renewables, but not with energy efficiency measures. So we are losing sight of what we want to accomplish, which is besides from being renewables, we need to be more efficient and effective in terms of the energy consumption. So something important to understand in terms of energy efficiency is that today what's very more relevant is to understand what is happening right now with the Ukrainian war and its impact in terms of the prices of fossil fuels and the impact of the agriculture and fertilizers, etc. So all this value chain has been affected, and therefore we are more energetically insecure. So if we talk about energy efficiency, we would talk about energy efficiency some years ago, we would see more resilience in this regard on the impact. But now we have more positive components, the economic components and better health components. But I think that today's situation and the fact that we were impacted and affected by COVID, the fact that people had to stay at home, and the fact that we were exposed to climate conditions that they were not capable to cool their environment, to refrigerate their food. Just to give you some examples for efficient cooking. I mean, all of this means that we need to fight more to understand that energy efficiency is not just changing to technology that will have less kilowatt consumption. It is about doing a real transition in terms of the industry, household, transportation. So I believe that definitely we need to keep working on that, and we need to keep on producing better indicators so this can be shown to policymakers and to demonstrate that energy efficiency is important. There is a very clear example now with Russia and Ukraine. There were a million barrels of oil were reduced. So these oil barrels could have been saved if there had been energy efficiency measures being implemented that were effective, instead of just trying to have better or easier access to this. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruben. Yeah, as a matter of fact, there are good measures implemented by the IEA on how to reduce the consumption of fuels. to be less dependent on Russia's gas. And it talks about energy efficiency as well. So all of these may be present in terms of energy efficiency. So Rodrigo, I want to ask you from Mendes' standpoint, how can we release this potential in terms of energy efficiency? What do you think about this?
Creo que lo mencionó Rubén. I think Rubén mentioned it. We are in a very adequate moment. And in Brazil, we can perceive that photovoltaic generation grew a lot in the country with a lot of enterprises. We received a lot of investment, and it was positively received. And people do not look at energy efficiency as an alternative because they don't know about it. They don't want to invest in these projects. Many people believe that energy efficiency projects have a lot of more profitability than distributed energy projects. We need to foster energy management projects. Now we can establish indicators for measuring energy. A kilowatt per hour is cheaper because of energy and renewable energy. We have to reevaluate monitoring and to measure, to make possible energy efficiency, because sometimes it is difficult to understand these questions. We have to train specialized professionals in energy efficiency. It is really important at this time.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo, for your answer. I would like to ask José Antonio, from IDB's experience supporting countries in implementation of energy efficiency programs, what ingredients should be part of a good energy efficiency program? Yeah, of course. Well, there are great elements. First of all, high level of pressure possible, the improvement of energy efficiency in economic, financial, social terms, as much as possible to implement the possible measures to implement profitability, affordability, technical feasibility, and the effect on the mitigation of greenhouse gas effect, and to have a sufficiently precise diagnosis to have a program with goals and with clear affordability. Secondly, it is about the clear definition of the parties involved, and also the need to strengthen the capacities of these agencies, of the manufacturers of equipment, the environmental companies and agencies, and those companies dedicated to the management of waste. And thirdly, it is about designing financial innovative mechanisms. We cannot think of having the same financing structure. We believe that the concept of energy service companies that base these companies called ESCOs, energy service companies. Well, in this sense, the public-private associations or partnerships are the element that definitely helps doing things faster. And also, it is like, as part of all these programs, we should develop mechanisms that enable and mechanism and the implementation of a mechanism of the monitoring and assessment of the implementation of energy efficiency. But since the beginning of the program, we have seen programs that progress, and at the end there is an evaluation mechanism being defined. We need to have this monitoring mechanism from the beginning in order to apply things more well, better, in a better way, and also to have risk analysis as well. Nobody in this planet thought we were going to have such a crisis, a crisis like the pandemic in 2020. There were hotels like through energy service companies that stopped using electricity. They didn't have the cash flow to pay to these energy service companies. But the risks that we face with these programs are very diverse, and we must have openness to implement them. Thank you, Jose Antonio. Very well. Now, I would like to include some of the questions from the audience so we can do this more dynamic. And the questions from the public we have so far are: can you please share a governance experience with the cities' governments? There are many cities in the Latin American region that are moving forward on energy efficiency. Can you please share your experience on this? This is open to all four panelists. Can you share your experiences on governance for the cities governance? Yeah, we have been working with some national governments, and something that is very relevant is distributed generation in schools. One of the important effects of the pandemic was the need to reduce budget for several activities. One of them, which was really affected, was the budget on education. From the very few saving opportunities that exist, you cannot save on the payroll of teachers, but you can save on the consumption of energy, working with areas and making working groups. We have the finance area participating in environmental areas to integrate working groups, working teams that work on the development of these programs on private-public partnerships. And I think this can be an interesting example that can be extrapolated in all these governments in the countries of our region. Thank you so much. Let me share another question from the audience. How do you coordinate? How can agencies like yours, like ECLAC, OLADE, Mendes, to really have a real impact on energy efficiency in our countries? How can you be aligned? I see that there is coordination between OLADE, ECLAC, IDB. Mendes is more local, but what do you think of this possible coordination to have better impact on the projects? Look, at least on our behalf, I could tell you that our IDB and my colleagues may agree with me. We are always we have ongoing communication.
Específico también, y la idea es cómo integrarnos y apoyarnos.
We all have a specific role, and the idea is to use each other's support.
La OLADE es donde se hace la ministerial.
We provide financial support. That is the IDB's role, and we have also forums where we discuss all of these, and we discuss the alignment at long term. Also, LADE has supported with the database. We have provided technical assistance also to address specific issues that need to be developed and regarding the adoption of energy efficiency. So I think we already work in a coordinated manner. We cannot coordinate all aspects when we are talking about independent projects. But in general, these great activities are always in coordination, in discussion, and the issue changes at a more particular level, at national level, where we have different niches, as Jose Antonio was saying. And We are working also on pilot projects. So we are in general coordinated. That's why I was talking about, for example, on duplication, because before 2019, there was a lot of duplication, but from 2005 on so on, we started seeing less duplication of efforts, and also our information is public. I mean, it's not that we don't share with anybody. We actually have public information being shared with the IDB, with OLADE, and energy poverty, and was something that we worked on together, IDB, OLADE, and us. So not a lack of coordination. Actually, we're all in our working from our own trench. Rodrigo, you want to say something about this?
No Brasil, eu posso destacar, a gente tem desde os anos 80,
I could highlight that in Brazil, we've had, even since the 80s, a national conservation program on electrical energy, and this program can be articulated between the government and through the Ministry of Energy and the partnership of companies. This program makes calls for projects annually where companies and advisors can take their projects, they can have competitions between them, and they can discuss about energy efficiency. Aside of this program, I would like to highlight the laboratory on financials, which summons several financial institutions such as the Bank of Brazil, and there's also an agency of LSD. This is a discussion forum to take many other products and financial instruments to Brazil from the capital market of the market to develop the energy transition and to be able to establish a direct contact with the private market.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Rodrigo, very interesting program that you are actually developing as well. Another question from the audience is, they say that indicators per country are very interesting, but what about specific information of each company? What is the role of energy diagnosis? Diagnostics. Yeah, very, very briefly, I want to tell you that it's something that we have seen a lot, because when we started working on the indicators of energy efficiency, we wanted to understand what was the behavior of consumption at the industrial level, and we encountered a great barrier with intellectual property, because many industries don't want to submit their information, don't want to share the information, and if there is no law or legislation forcing the industry to submit this information, they just won't do it. So there comes the need to have a clear national level plan, including the private sector, and making all information transparent, and to give accountability, because even talking about the fact that there is conflict of competitiveness and competition among countries, and this also affects the fact that means that there is a lag on this because of these indicators we have seen in ECLAC. José Antonio, you want to say something?
José Antonio, you also wanted to say something. Yes, and I fully agree with what Ruben said, and I put a link on the chat from the observatory that we developed with OLADE on how to implement under the ISO 501. And there we give all the bibliography on how to implement all the systems on energy efficiency so that the companies can get on a meeting and assess how much they've improved. And I think that the way to really work with the companies to push all this forward is it, because the highest corporations have made a huge improvements on this in the different industries, on plastics, on the bakery industry, on all the industries. But we need to do it further with saving energies, with many more things, so that they can implement up to 30% more with different tools that they already mentioned. Thank you very much. Do you want to say something more, Maisela? Yeah, I just want to say something regarding the last two questions, because of course, us as agencies know which are our strengths, and we know that we have information, but we can also help with training. And access to information can also help to the private sector, because we know that they lack trust. They are afraid that they will lose competitiveness, and they also don't want to give their information away to be compared with others. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so now I will make another round of questions. Maisela, I want to ask you, for those countries in the region who want to start with a legal framework on energy efficiency, what are your recommendations? What are the key elements that need to be on their legal framework? Well, first, they need to acknowledge that the legal framework is part of legal public policies, but it's not only that. There are some countries where they started with the legal framework, but then they were lacking some other elements. So yes, it is important to know that we need to highlight all the benefits from energy efficiency, but we also need to start by saying which are the problems that we already have in our communities, because we usually don't want to change. So if they start by saying what we are going to win by having this energy efficiency in our lives, then we might be able to accept it better. Regarding law, we have seen in many of the legal frameworks that we have to take into account both the offer and the demand. And we need to see the legal framework in both sides. Thank you, Maisela. And now, from CEPAL's perspective, Ruben, what are your recommendations for governments to have a better integration of energy efficiency on their national plans? Well, on one side, there needs to be more awareness on the importance of energy efficiency, not only on the political side, but also on the education, and also to focus on some aspects that haven't had such importance on the long term, including some things that they haven't treated in the regional levels, such as the thermal comfort, cooling, heating, construction standards, and also making new technologies which are more efficient, accessible for everyone, because poor populations need to have access to them as well. And on the other side, we need to work with the statistic institutes to have key data and to make all the important assessments for the census evaluations they do, and to have the key indicators for the third tier that will help us to work on energy efficiency into more detail, to really understand how people is needing and using this energy. It will be a lot more useful because, as they were already mentioning, we still have a lot of companies using old-fashioned technologies and obsolete technologies. And we also need to measure the percentage of investment we have for energy efficiency by GDP in the countries to know in which sectors they are getting the more investment. Yes, that's right, because the energy efficiency indicators we have are not actually reflecting the improvement we have. Maybe they are only reflecting some change on trends of consumption or such, but not the actual improvement we are getting. Rodrigo, I want now to ask you, on the companies financing energy efficiency projects are not quite big. Maybe they won't have so much credit capacities to really fund big projects. So which ideas or programs or suggestions can we think of to get rid of these barriers?
It is a really important question, and it is really interesting because bank credit is a very sensitive subject, especially for companies in this vision to be able to articulate everything. The bank first reviews the capacity to be able to review the quality of the project after. And in this way, aside from this, it is a financing structure where you can isolate the project of the company, and it is not applicable to small projects because the company has a transaction cost. Because, well, I believe that in this case, the ESCOs and the smallest companies, perhaps going out into the capital market, would be through emitting bonds, and also the investment funds, which in Brazil are called CITICs. They receive projects of energy efficiency that could be more suitable for these cases. And here we could have the managers of these funds who are specialized in energy efficiency, who could evaluate the risks and profitability of each project so that good coordination may be held in the portfolio. That's how we generate a diversified portfolio on different projects. And this way, getting out of the debt vision, which is a typical vision of the bank.
Thank you, Rodrigo. That's absolutely right. And Jose Antonio, from the IDB perspective, how can we boost the energy efficiency capacity from the governments? I think that's a key question, Virginia, and the best way to do it is learning with a hands-on effort by implementing, executing our programs. I mean, that's not necessarily possible in right away, but we can learn from other countries' experiences. Rodrigo was mentioning Procel, and I actually learned from that. I've been working in many decades in energy efficiency, and I learned from Procel in a very effective way. So I think that the exchange of experience and to have these kind of interventions and trying to get from the federal level and try to get it in a local level is a good opportunity to do it. And of course, this training week that the agency is organizing is key for that. Thank you, Jose Antonio. So the audience has a lot of questions. We still have a few minutes, and I will be making a couple of them. Carolina Avalos is asking, from your experience, what would you recommend as public policies so the education sector can make a culture of energy saving? Well, I'm passionate about education, and it relates with the previous question as well. If we do not work on energy savings, then all our efforts will be limited, even if we have the best team, the best equipment. And if we don't use it correctly, then our savings won't be useful, and our measures, everything will be useless. So it's fundamental to create this culture, and they are vital to create that on the youth, on the children. So it's key that they understand the well use of all our resources and the impact it gets to our environment. That's a key element, and I get really passionate when I talk about that. When we talk about energy efficiency, it has a lot to do with culture and with a formal education. Perfect. Yes, that's true that education is a key element on energy efficiency. I always tell my students that each one of them is kind of an ambassador on energy efficiency, and each one of us needs to do the same thing. We need to be true fans on energy efficiency from very early stages of our life. We need to do that. We need to create that culture on people. I have another question from our audience. Pedro Pereira said, good afternoon. I want to know if our panelists have any kind of programs that support financially governments to create policies on energy efficiency. Are there any programs that are funded by your institutions? Well, I mean, it depends on what you refer by funded, because from the Economic Commission, what we do is to give technical support and technical assistance. That's the first phase. And OLADE gives the same technical assistance, and we gather data, and the IGV does the same thing. We give technical support, we give a lot of technical assistance, and then it's the next step, which goes to the biggest scale. But when we speak about funding, it's not that we give money to the governments directly, but it's to create institutions, to create specific divisions with qualified staff to do the tasks. So we give different support in different aspects, and we'll do it. And by doing it, we've already achieved that countries create energy efficiency entities. The IDV also supported countries to create jobs on this aspect, to work with energy efficiency. And the government is always
working with the with the Ministry of Energy, because without them, there's nothing to do, right? So that would be my comment with that, on that regard. Virginia, from Olave, we have also given some funds, some international funds to build capacities and training, and also for the public, general public. Just remember that all the funds we have at Olave is the most important thing is to highlight that all our funding is of public access. That's great. Thank you, Maisela. And just to wrap up our panel, I want to thank all of you, our 4 panelists, for your presentations, your answers, and all the enlightening you gave to us on the perspective of energy efficiency. It's quite important, everything that we've learned from you. I mean, not only today, but every day. I'm very happy on all the comments you've been so kind to share with us on the importance of the databases to keep improving on energy efficiency, on how important it is to get information, to gather it, and to assess it. And I think you're doing a great job on that. And it's also important to tackle all the barriers we have, among those, the cultural barrier. And I want to close this panel again, thanking all of my distinguished panelists, which I was very pleased to have in this great morning and afternoon. On the other hand, I want to thank Melanie for being such a great guide and for organizing this panel and this seminar, and also for organizing the Latin Training Week, which we hope will be very fruitful for all of you. We've seen a lot of interest from the people. You will be training 3 main areas of work, and all of us who will be joining in the sessions will be working very hard. And now we'll be starting officially the training week. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Virginia, and thank you for your moderation of such a great panel. Thanks to all the panelists too for their contributions. It's really interesting to hear the really deep experience of people who are working, of course, on a day-to-day basis in the Latin America region. And I'm hoping in some small way that we can make a contribution to building the cohort of policymakers who will be implementing all of your projects in the future and responding to the information that you're providing with them with. So great panel, really enjoyed it. And I think this rounds off the day nicely in terms of the formal opening and setting the scene for the rest of the week, which of course is where the hard work starts, where we roll up our sleeves and really get into the details. My colleagues will be taking us through the way that the rest of the week is going to work shortly. But just to say that we will ask all of the trainees who have registered for the training event to log back in through the links that they've been sent at 10 o'clock Brasilia time, 12 o'clock Mexico, which is 7 o'clock in the evening here in Paris. And then we'll be explaining how the rest of the week is going to work. So thanks once again, everybody. And hopefully we'll continue to be in touch on this journey on energy efficiency with all of the agencies sitting around the table now. And we'll, of course, be building on your knowledge and experience throughout the week. And with that, I will close the session and see many people again in about 20 minutes. Thank you.